Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching. Thank you for joining us. Today is the day where I have to winterize the old Fun Parent mobile command unit, which is AKA the Rockwood Roo 233S. So one of the more common questions that I've gotten over the last 3 years of owning this Rockwood Roo 233S is, what do we think about it? What are the pros and cons of it? And today we are delivering that video to you. So if you're in the market to buy a Rockwood Roo 233S and you wanted to know a little bit more about a 3-year real life example of what it's like to own one, come on along with me because I'm about to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything involved with owning a hybrid camper, especially a Rockwood Roo 233S. So let's get right to it. So I think the first thing we need to discuss today is kind of why the Rockwood Roo was the camper choice for us as a family. And it really came down to tow capacity. We are currently using a 2017 Chevy Tahoe LS, which is the base model Chevy Tahoe, which comes with a max tow capacity of 6,600 pounds max. So we were limited on what we were going to be able to do, what we could actually tow that would accommodate our family's needs, but still give us enough room. And that's why I'm kind of inside the camper right now. So let's talk a little bit about the inside of the Rockwood Roo, pros, cons, and everything in between. So the first pro of owning a Rockwood Roo 233S is the sheer amount of space you have on the interior here. So I've got this camper all set up as if we were camping in it. And as you can see, this particular unit comes equipped with 3 queen size beds. So these are true 60 by 80 beds, which can accommodate up to 6 adults. Usually we have Nick sleeping in this back bed here. Kaylee sleeps in this bed here. And then Court and I are sleeping up in the front bed up here. Now, this dinette is a really nice, large U-shaped dinette, but this is actually currently serving double purpose for us because this is also where we put Abby's pack and play. It fits perfectly in between the bench seats here. That table comes out, and that gives us plenty of room inside this camper for everything we're gonna need, staying within the tow ratings that we have with our Chevy Tahoe. So now that also segues to one of the cons about owning a Rockwood Roo, and that is it is a hybrid camper, which means I am now currently laying in a tent. And the bottom line is if you are a light sleeper or you do not like having any kind of noise when you're sleeping in a tent is not good for you. That's one of the things that we picked up on pretty quickly after owning the camper was we would go into a noisy campground where people were hanging out, listening to music, staying up late. And it was real difficult to get the kids to bed, but it was also difficult sometimes for us to stay asleep as well. So that is something to consider. If you are a light sleeper and you do not like necessarily being in a tent, this is what you're sleeping in. It's right here. It's all fabric. And that kind of also brings up another point about sleeping in tent beds, and that is temperature control. This unit is equipped with a really nice 13,000 BTU AC unit, or even actually it's actually a 15,000 BTU AC unit. But that does not necessarily hold up on a really hot summer day, especially if you have the curtains on the tents open. So what we generally try to do is when we are going to a place where we know it's going to be extremely hot for the next few days is during the daytime, we will close the curtains on the tent beds, which then kind of blocks out as much of the heat as possible, keeping the main cabin area nice and cool. And then at nighttime, when things cool off a little bit, we'll open those curtains up and then we'll cool off the actual tent beds at that time. We found that works. We did go and we did purchase a set of gecko covers, which we absolutely hated. I know I may be a minority in the group of people that feel that way, but we put them on maybe twice, more for cold weather camping than anything else. And it did nothing to stop the moisture buildup inside, which we'll talk about in a second. And then also, we didn't really find that it kept it that much warmer inside the camper during the cold months than if we just didn't have them on. So we actually stopped putting them on altogether and just went back to using the regular tent beds. And so far, it hasn't been too much of an issue. And that brings up another point. What about cold weather camping, right? So we've talked about heat and we've talked about trying to keep the temperature down in the camper, but what about trying to keep the temperature warm? When you warm the inside of an area and the outside is cold, you get what's called condensation. And condensation is a real issue in the hybrid campers. Some people have been able to resolve it by putting the gecko covers on. I have not had that luck. There have been times where we've woken up in the morning and the entire top of this tent here is soaking wet to the touch. Eventually it dries out, but just keep in mind that especially if you have a bunch of people sleeping in this camper, you will get moisture inside of it. It will build up, and eventually you might even get some drops dripping on your head to wake you up in the morning. Another really important thing to take into consideration when you're thinking about buying a hybrid camper. And the last thing we are going to talk about when it comes to the beds is water. So anybody who's owned a hybrid knows that over time, these seals that close these beds up will eventually start to fail, and then water will start to drip in. Some people have put channels on the outside of their camper up top to prevent water from coming through. Although that is a great solution to the problem, it's not working on my camper because we don't have them yet. So that is the next project that we're going to do. But this bed in particular has gotten water in it twice now. And it's very frustrating when you arrive at your destination to camp and there is water in the beds. So keep that in mind. If you do not keep up with your seal maintenance, which we have actually done, you could run into a situation where you'll have water in your camper. So now that I've addressed all of the not so fun things about having the tent beds, let's talk about some of the fun stuff that comes along with this camper. So from an overall space issue, there is no lack of space inside this camper. Now keep in mind, we are currently standing inside of basically a 20-foot box. So this camper from tip to tail is 24 feet long, but we have enough room in here for about a 30-foot travel trailer. So if you don't want to tow a giant box down the road, this is where a hybrid can be a great option for you. The other thing we're going to bring attention to is it has a full bathroom in it, including an enclosed shower. Now I know you may be thinking to yourself, well, all RVs have bathrooms, right? But we're coming from an old pop-up camper that did not have this. So I'm assuming a lot of you probably watching this video right now might also be coming from either tent camping or coming from a pop-up situation. And I can tell you right now, having a bathroom and having an enclosed wall area where you can kind of hang out on a rainy day with plenty of room is a huge pro to having a hybrid camper. So that's going to kind of wrap up the inside of the camper. Let's head outside and talk about some of the features this camper has on the outside that are absolutely amazing. So the first thing I'm going to draw attention to on the outside of this camper is that awning. So again, I mentioned earlier, this is a 20-ish foot box, right? That is an 18-foot awning on this camper. You're not going to find many campers out there that are going to be putting an 18-foot awning on a 20-foot box. And that's just one of the things that I think Rockwood does a lot differently. This is not a cheap camper. There are a lot cheaper campers out there that you can get that are much larger than this, but you are not going to find the types of options that you're going to find with a Rockwood camper. And that's one of the reasons that we went with the Rockwood brand. So we talked about storage on the inside, but let's also talk about the storage here on the outside as well. So this has a huge storage compartment in here. It is much larger than what you're going to find in most smaller campers. And let's head around to the other side to show you what other storage options there are on the outside. We've got almost an identical size hatch door here on the outside, but this is actually underneath the dinette and it extends all the way back to the back corners there. So you could theoretically pack this thing full of stuff. This is where we keep all of our utility wires, our hoses, our sewer connections, everything gets put into this back compartment. That way it's a one-stop shop for me when I am there setting up. And the last stop on our storage container is this one here, which it is actually locked right now. I forgot to get the key for it. But that is where we keep a lot of the stuff that we don't need to access on a regular basis. So things like tablecloths, random miscellaneous boxes full of kind of camping supplies that we don't use all the time, but if we need access to it from inside or outside the camper, we have quick access. Just wanted to share the outside here a little bit with you, just to show you kind of what the tent beds look like from the outside here. So you've got the 3 queen beds. And as I mentioned earlier, although you're towing a rather small box, when you open this camper up, it expands out to be 31 feet long. And that's because the tent beds extend out. But it doesn't really look like it takes up that much space when it's all set up. So you could squeeze into much smaller campsites than you would with some other larger box campers. One of the other things I'm going to highlight here while I got this ladder set up is the solar panels. So I opted for 290 watt solar panels on the roof of this camper here. I believe Rockwood is now offering this camper with a 200 watt solar panel standard. So you could have up to 400 watts total if you double it up. But that is something, again, that you're not going to find standard on most campers. So we've now owned this camper for about 3 years. So let's talk a little bit about the trials and tribulations that we've had with the camper so far. For the most part, we have had nothing but great experiences with this camper. There were a couple things that we ran into. I already mentioned the water and the tent beds. I think the tent bed situation is probably the biggest handicap to this camper, which is kind of ironic because if you're buying a hybrid camper, that's one of the things that's probably the biggest downside to it is that you're sleeping in a tent bed. But the bottom line is again, it opens up so much space inside the camper that it is kind of a necessary evil to have, especially if you are towing this camper with a truck that is not capable of towing anything bigger. One of the other major pros to this camper is the exhaust fans and also the AC unit. So as I mentioned earlier, it has a 15,000 BTU AC unit, which I upgraded. But it does come equipped with a 13,500 BTU AC unit if you just go with the standard AC. Now, this vent fan here is stock. These are the larger Max Air vent fans. There are 2 of these, including covers, in this unit. So these are not things you typically will see standard on most campers. Usually they'll put a little 4-inch fan in, and it's not great. The other cool thing about the AC unit on this is that it is all vented. So these are all separate AC ducts. So what we do is if you go over here to the main unit, if you shut this main unit, it will vent the AC through those vents that you see in the ceiling here. When we first arrive at our camping destination, we flip that open and that dumps all the cold air into the main living area to cool down the camper quicker. And then once you've reached temperature, you can shut that down, and it makes it nice and cool throughout, even when you're sleeping. I know I talked poorly about the tent beds a lot throughout this video, but the bottom line is one of the pros of the tent beds is being able to open up the windows and allow all the natural light to come in, and it makes it so much more roomier and airy in here. So let's go ahead and do that now, just so you can see what it looks like. And just like that, we are now open and airy and allowing tons of airflow in, plus you get a great view. Unfortunately, right now we got a view of the back of our car and Stubbs' truck, but imagine if you were at a nice, beautiful lake here and you could look out these windows and look at the scenery. It is pretty awesome being able to do that. So now that kind of leads to the $1 million question, right? I think this is the question that a lot of people ask us in our comments, and that is, would we do it again? Would we buy a hybrid camper again, knowing what we know now? And here's what I'll tell you. There's never going to be the right time to make a camper purchase. Let's just put it that way, right? So you're always going to have some kind of a roadblock in your way, whether it be affordability, or the kids are too young, or the kids are too old, or we have so much other stuff going on. So what I can tell you is you have to make a decision for yourself on whether or not you want to start the RV life, or if you want to just keep talking about it. And if the way for you to get into the RV life is to invest in something like a hybrid camper to get comfortable with it, see if you like it without having to upgrade tow vehicles, then make that be the thing that you do. For me, I think it was a great investment. I'm really happy we bought the camper we did. This thing has taken us on so many adventures over the last 3 years. I cannot complain about anything with this camper. But with that being said, do I see us upgrading to a non-hybrid in the future? Time will tell. I would say if it was up to us right now financially, if we could buy a $80,000 tow vehicle and then a $70,000 travel trailer, we would absolutely be doing that. But from a financial perspective right now, this is what we have, and this is what's working really well for us. So again, is it 100% the perfect camper? No, it's not. You are going to have to do a lot more work with it, setting it up, breaking it down. It's not as easy as pulling in, hooking up the shore power, and you're off to the races. There's a lot more work that goes into this camper, but it's less work than a pop-up and a lot less work than tent camping. So keep that in mind. I would say I'm grateful to be able to have this camper, but I think Court and I both would agree that if we had to do it again, we would probably have invested in a smaller bunkhouse camper that maybe didn't have as many amenities, but at least we were enclosed. Kind of sounds like a double standard, right? But that's the reality here. So the hybrid has a ton of room in it. I love this camper, but I don't think this is our long-term forever camper. We are eventually going to upgrade to something else. It's just a matter of it being the right time for us to do so. But with that being said, the Roo 233S will be part of the Fun Parent family for at least the next year to 2 years. And I'm looking forward to taking you out on all of our adventures with us. So if you haven't done so already, click that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future adventures. And with that being said, we're done, son.